Chapter 1. The Life You Inherited. At some point in your life, probably when you were too young to question it, someone handed you a map. Not literally, not with ceremony or explanation. It was more subtle than that. It came through the things that were celebrated in your home and the things that were not, through what your parents worried about and what they seemed to want for you, through the school you attended and what it valued, through the neighborhood you grew up in, the friends you had, the culture you absorbed without realizing you were absorbing it. The map said, here is what a successful life looks like. Here is what you should want. Here is the route. Study this, achieve that, become this kind of person, reach these kinds of milestones. And if you follow it carefully enough, you will arrive somewhere good. And so you followed it. Most of us did, not because we were weak or unthinking, but because we were young, and the map was already drawn, and following it felt like the responsible thing to do. The question nobody asked, the question most people never ask, even decades later, is whether the map was drawn for you or for someone else entirely. Take a moment and think honestly about the life you are living right now. Not the parts you chose freely and deliberately, with full awareness of what you were choosing and why, but the parts that simply accumulated. The career path you started down because it seemed practical and somehow never changed. The city you live in because you went there for one reason and stayed for inertia. The definition of success you are working toward, the income level, the title, the kind of house, the particular shape of achievement that you have been chasing for years without ever fully examining where it came from. Where did those things come from? If you sit with that question honestly, not defensively, not in a hurry to reassure yourself that everything you're doing is a genuine reflection of who you are, you may find something uncomfortable. A significant portion of what you call your life goals were never really your goals. They were your parents' goals for you, translated into your own vocabulary. Or they were the goals your peer group normalized until they became invisible, just the obvious thing to want. Or they were the goals that the culture you grew up in quietly installed, so seamlessly that you assumed they were your own thoughts rather than a kind of ambient programming that happened long before you were equipped to evaluate it. This is not a criticism. It is not a reason to feel deceived or resentful or suddenly untethered from everything you've been building. It is simply an observation, an important, potentially life-changing observation that most of us are living towards something we never consciously chose. Think about the first time someone asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up. You were probably very young, and whatever you said, whatever dream you articulated in that moment, before the world had fully gotten to you, there is a good chance someone smiled and either encouraged it or gently redirected it. Not with malice, with the best intentions, with the genuine desire to protect you from impracticality, from failure, from the particular pain of wanting something the world might not give you. And somewhere in that redirection, in the repeated experience of having your instincts met with pragmatism, your desires filtered through other people's fears, you began to learn something. What you actually want is less reliable than what is sensible. What you feel drawn toward is less trustworthy than what is approved of. Over years, that lesson embeds itself deeply, not as a belief you can point to and examine, but as a habit of self-editing, a reflexive subordination of genuine desire to external expectation. A life built layer by layer, decision by decision, towards something that looks coherent from the outside and feels slightly hollow from the inside. Not hollow in a dramatic way, not the kind of emptiness that announces itself, the quieter kind. The kind you only notice in the stillness, when the busyness stops for a moment and something in you surfaces. Not quite dissatisfied, not quite certain it's in the right life, and you push it back down and carry on. That surfacing is important. Pay attention to it. I want to be careful here, because this is a place where it's easy to swing too far in the wrong direction. The point is not that everything you were taught is wrong. The point is not that your parents' values are invalid, or that the expectations of your culture are worthless, or that practicality is the enemy of authenticity. Many of the things you were taught are genuinely good. The value of hard work, of integrity, of taking care of the people you love, these are not impositions to be shed. They are inheritances worth keeping. The question is not whether your inherited values are right or wrong. The question is whether you have ever actually examined them, whether you have ever held them up to the light and asked, "Do I believe this because it is true, or because I was never given permission to question it?" Here is the most important question in this chapter. Not the most comfortable one, the most important one. If you stripped away everything, every expectation, every obligation, every definition of success that came from outside you, what would remain? If no one was watching, if no one would be disappointed, if no one would offer their opinion on whether your choices were wise or sensible or sufficiently ambitious, if the only measure that mattered was whether the life you were living felt genuinely, unmistakably, deeply like yours, what would you be doing differently? What would you stop doing? What would you finally start? Don't answer quickly. Don't answer with the first thing that comes to mind, which is often just another layer of conditioning dressed up as authenticity. Sit with it. Let the question do its work. Because somewhere underneath everything you have been taught to want, everything you have been conditioned to pursue, everything you have never examined because it was easier to keep moving than to stop and look, there is something that is actually yours. Something that has always been there, patient and persistent, surfacing in the moments when you forget to suppress it. This book is about finding it. You were handed a map. The question is whether it leads anywhere you actually want to go. Chapter 2, The Noise. There has never been a harder time in human history to hear yourself think. Not because the world has become more dangerous or more demanding, though it has in its own ways, but because for the first time in history, we carry in our pockets a device that gives every person on earth direct access to our attention, 24 hours a day, with no friction, no gatekeeping, and no natural stopping point. And most of what that device delivers is other people's lives. Not real lives, curated ones, compressed highlights, the best angles, the most flattering light, the achievements without the years of failure that preceded them, the confidence without the private uncertainty that lives beneath it, an endless, carefully edited reel of what other people want you to believe their existence looks like. And your brain, which evolved in a world where your social circle was a village of 150 people, takes all of it in as though it is real information. As though the couple on the beach in Santorini, the entrepreneur announcing their 7-figure launch, the person whose body and wardrobe and apartment seem to exist in permanent editorial perfection, as though these are your actual peers, people whose lives are a legitimate basis for comparison with your own. They are not. But try telling that to the part of your brain that can't stop looking. Here is what comparison does to your sense of what you want. It hijacks it. Not all at once, subtly, gradually, through the accumulated weight of thousands of small exposures that each leave a tiny residue. You see someone's life in a thought forms, barely conscious, barely articulable, that goes something like, "That looks like a good life." And then another thought, quieter still, "Mine doesn't look like that." And then, quietest of all, The most dangerous thought, maybe I should want what they have. Over time, your sense of what you want stops being generated from the inside, from your own values, your own experience, your own genuine sense of what a meaningful life feels like for you, and starts being generated from the outside, from what is visible, from what is being celebrated, from what the particular slice of the world you are exposed to has decided is worth having. This is not vanity. It is not shallowness. It is what happens to a human nervous system that was not designed for this volume of external input about how other people's lives look. You are not weak for being susceptible to it. You are human. But you are also capable of noticing it. And noticing it is the beginning of getting free. Comparison is not the only noise. There is the noise of other people's opinions, the running commentary of family, friends, colleagues, and well-meaning strangers on how you are living your life and whether you are making sensible choices. The raised eyebrow when you mention a direction that doesn't fit the expected trajectory. The concern, usually genuine, always limiting, that surfaces whenever you contemplate something that looks risky or unconventional or simply different from what was planned for you. There is the noise of culture, the ambient messages about what constitutes a valuable life, what kind of work is worthy of respect, what milestones you should have reached by what age, the invisible scorecards that you didn't create but somehow agreed to be measured by. And beneath all of it, beneath the comparison and the opinions and the cultural scripts and the momentum of past choices, there is the quietest and most insidious noise of all. The noise of your own fear, dressed up as wisdom, disguised as pragmatism, speaking in the voice of reason and caution in the responsible consideration of consequences. But fear at its core. Let me ask you something direct. When was the last time you made a significant life decision in genuine silence? Not silence meaning the absence of sound, but silence meaning the absence of external influence. No conversations with people whose approval matters to you. No scrolling through other people's lives as an unconscious reference point. No consulting the cultural script for what someone in your position is supposed to want next. Just you, alone with yourself, asking, what do I actually think about this? What do I actually feel? Getting quiet is not easy. It requires something the modern world is specifically designed to prevent. Boredom. Not the anxious boredom of having nothing to do and reaching immediately for distraction. The deeper boredom. The kind that comes when you deliberately withdraw from the noise for long enough that your mind, having exhausted its performance of busyness, finally settles into something more honest. In that settled place, things surface that don't surface anywhere else. The thing you keep thinking about that you've been telling yourself is impractical. The direction that keeps appearing in your imagination despite having no obvious justification. The version of your life that you've never let yourself fully articulate, because doing so would mean admitting how different it is from the one you're actually living. These are not fantasies to be dismissed. They are signals. The noise is not going to stop. The comparison, the opinions, the cultural scripts, the fear dressed up as wisdom, none of it is going away. But you can learn to hear yourself beneath it. You can build the practice, small, daily, deeply countercultural, of turning the noise down regularly, of simply listening to what comes up, to what keeps coming up, to what has always been there, underneath everything, patient, persistent, waiting for you to get quiet enough to finally hear it. The life you want is not louder than the noise. It is quieter. You have to earn the silence to find it. Chapter 3. What you want versus what you want to want. There is a distinction that almost nobody talks about, And it may be the most important one in this entire book. The difference between what you want and what you want to want. They feel the same from the inside. That is the trap. Both arrive wearing the clothes of genuine desire. Both come with a sense of urgency, a vision of the future, a feeling that this, whatever this is what you are supposed to be reaching for. But they come from completely different places. What you actually want is rooted in something real. It connects to your specific nature, your particular way of experiencing the world, the things that make you feel alive rather than merely occupied, the version of your days that leaves you feeling spent in the right way rather than simply depleted. It is often inconvenient, frequently impractical, sometimes difficult to explain to other people in a way that sounds impressive, but it is unmistakably yours. What you want to want is rooted in something else entirely. It is rooted in image, in how a particular life would look to other people, in the version of yourself you are trying to become in other people's eyes. Admirable, successful, worthy of respect, living in a way that nobody could question or dismiss. And it comes with a quiet promise that if you achieve it, you will finally feel like enough. The problem is, that promise is a lie. Most people are working very hard toward a life they want to want. Not the life that would make them genuinely, deeply, or sustainably fulfilled, but the life that would make them feel like they have won. The life that would silence the internal voice that says you haven't done enough, haven't achieved enough, haven't become enough yet to deserve full permission to rest. But here is what nobody tells you about achieving the life you want to want. You get there, you reach the milestone, you earn the thing you were reaching for, and for a moment, sometimes a long moment, it feels exactly as good as you thought it would. The relief, the pride, the external confirmation that yes, you made it, you are enough. The story of your life is a good one. And then it fades. Not because you are ungrateful, not because you don't deserve to feel good about what you've built, but because the life you want to want was never designed to make you feel fulfilled. It was designed to make you feel approved of. And approval, however real, however genuine, cannot fill the specific shape of what you actually wanted and never got. The hunger returns, slightly different in form, identical in nature, and the chase begins again. I want to ask you something, and I want you to resist the urge to answer quickly. Think about something you are currently working toward, something you have told yourself and probably told other people that you really want. A goal, an achievement, a life circumstance you are trying to create. Now ask yourself, how would you feel if you got it and nobody knew? Does the wanting survive the removal of the audience? Here is the hardest version of this question. What would you want if you were certain you could not fail, but also certain that no one would ever know you had succeeded? No external recognition, no change in status, no impressive story to tell, just the private experience of having built or done or become something held entirely within yourself, invisible to the world. What remains? Living toward what you want to want is exhausting in a very specific way. Not the productive exhaustion of hard work done in service of something meaningful. The other kind. The kind that comes from spending your energy in the wrong direction, from climbing a ladder that is leaning against the wrong wall, and arriving somewhere that looks like success from the outside, while feeling, privately, like a mild and inexplicable disappointment. You've worked hard. You've done the things you were supposed to do. You've reached milestones that should feel significant. And yet something doesn't quite add up. The life you have built is impressive by any reasonable measure. And still, in the quiet moments, in the honest ones, it doesn't feel entirely like yours. That feeling is not ingratitude. It is not depression or a failure of perspective or proof that nothing will ever be enough for you. It is the feeling of a life that has been built toward what you wanted to want, rather than what you actually want. And it is trying to tell you something. What you want will impress other people. What you actually want will sustain you. Only one of them is worth building a life around. Chapter 4. The things you keep coming back to. Pay attention to what you keep coming back to. Not what you are supposed to care about. Not what you have convinced yourself is important based on what other people value, or what the culture rewards, or what would look good in the story of your life. But what you actually, repeatedly, almost involuntarily return to in your thoughts, in your imagination, in the quiet moments when nothing is demanding your attention and your mind goes where it wants. There is a pattern there, and that pattern is trying to tell you something. Think back across your life, not just recent year, but all of it. What are the things that have held your attention across time? Not the things you were forced to engage with, but the things you chose again and again, across different seasons of your life, in different contexts, under different circumstances. The subject you kept reading about long after the class that introduced you to it ended. The kind of work that made hours disappear. The type of conversation that left you feeling alive rather than depleted. The problem, some specific category of problem in the world, that you found yourself caring about with a disproportionate intensity compared to the people around you. These recurring interests are not coincidences. They are a fingerprint. Your specific, particular, unrepeatable fingerprint. There is a version of this that many people have experienced, but few have followed seriously. The thing you were good at as a child, before anyone told you whether it was practical. Before the world filtered your interests through the lens of viability, before you learned to ask whether something could pay, whether it was respectable, whether it was the kind of thing a serious person would devote their life to. There were things you did simply because they absorbed you completely, because when you were doing them, the rest of the world disappeared and you were wholly, effortlessly present in a way that felt different from anything else. Some people called it play, but it was more than play. It was rehearsal. It was the child version of you, with no agenda and no performance to manage, gravitating toward the things that were genuinely aligned with your particular nature. What were you doing when you forgot to perform for anyone? There is another category of signal worth paying attention to, and it is less comfortable than childhood joy. The things that make you disproportionately angry. Not the ordinary frustrations of daily life, the deeper anger, the kind that rises in you when you see a particular kind of injustice, a particular kind of waste, a particular type of problem being ignored or mishandled or perpetuated by people who should know better. That anger is information. It tells you what you care about at a level that goes beyond intellectual agreement. You don't just think this matters. You feel it, viscerally, in a way that is difficult to explain to people who don't share the same sensitivity. Pay attention to what breaks you open. That is not weakness. That is the fingerprint again, your particular sensitivity to a particular category of what is wrong in the world, which is often the inverse of your particular capacity to contribute something right. The things you keep coming back to are not trying to ruin your life. They are trying to complete it. They are the part of you that has been watching everything, every compromise, every accommodation, every decision made in the direction of sensible rather than true, and noting, quietly and persistently, the accumulating distance between who you are performing and who you actually are. They will keep returning. They always do. Not to torture you, not to make you feel inadequate for what you haven't yet built, But because they are real, because they are yours, because they are the most honest thing about you. And honesty, even inconvenient honesty, has a way of insisting on being heard. The things you keep coming back to are not distractions. They are directions. The question is whether you are finally ready to follow them. Chapter 5, The Cost of the Life You Want. Nobody talks about this part honestly. The book's about finding your purpose, living authentically, building the life you actually want. They tend to end at the moment of discovery, the clarifying realization, the permission finally granted to want what you've always wanted, the liberating recognition that the life you've been living was someone else's script, and you are now free to write your own. And then they stop, as though the discovery is the hard part, as though once you know what you want, the path to it is simply a matter of courage and commitment, the right morning routine. It isn't. The life you actually want has a price. A real, specific, non-negotiable price that most self-development content either glosses over or doesn't mention at all. And if you don't know what that price is, if you haven't looked at it clearly, in full, without flinching, you will spend years reaching for a life you haven't actually committed to paying for. Every meaningful choice is also a renunciation. This is the thing nobody wants to hear, and it is completely true. When you choose one life, you unchoose another. When you move toward what you actually want, you move away from what you have. When you say yes to the direction that is genuinely yours, you say no, sometimes permanently, to the direction that was expected, approved of, safely within the range of what the people around you can understand and support. There is no version of this that doesn't cost something. The person who leaves a stable career to build something of their own does not get to keep the stability. The person who relocates to a place that feels more like home leaves behind the people who made the old place home. The person who finally ends a relationship that was comfortable but not right does not get to keep the comfort while gaining the freedom. The person who commits fully to the work they actually care about gives up the time and energy they were spending on the work they didn't. You cannot have both. Not fully, not in the way that matters. Let me be specific about the kinds of costs that come with building the life you actually want. There is the cost of other people's disappointment. When you begin to move toward what you actually want, especially when that direction deviates from what was planned or expected, people will be disappointed. Some of those people will be ones you love. Parents who had a vision for you that you are no longer willing to inhabit. Friends whose sense of shared identity depended on you wanting what they want. Partners who signed up for a version of you that is in the process of becoming someone else. Their disappointment is real. Their feelings are valid. And you will not be able to fully prevent it or fully fix it. You can be honest with them, patient with them, loving toward them in the difficulty. But you cannot make the choice that is true for you and simultaneously spare everyone around you from the disruption of that choice. There is the cost of uncertainty. The life you have, however misaligned, however much it belongs to someone else's script, is known. It has a shape you can predict, risks you have already learned to manage, a floor beneath it that you can feel even on the hard days. The life you want does not come with that floor. It comes with the particular vertigo of having chosen something real over something safe and not yet knowing whether the choice will work out. There is the cost of time, not just the time required to build something new, but the time it takes to undo what has been built in the wrong direction. You will be older when you arrive than you would have been if you had started sooner. That is not a reason not to start, but it is a cost, and pretending it isn't one does not serve you. Here is what I want to say to anyone who is reading this and feeling the weight of these costs pressing down on them. The cost is real. I am not going to tell you it isn't. But there is another cost, one that receives far less attention. That is worth placing alongside it. The cost of not building the life you want, the quieter version, the one that accumulates daily, in small amounts, so gradually that it becomes almost invisible. The cost of waking up each morning to a life that is mostly fine, but not quite yours. The cost of the persistent, low-grade restlessness that follows you through days that are full, but not fulfilling. The cost of the creative and intellectual and emotional capacity you are not using, not because it doesn't exist, but because the life you are living has no room for it. The cost of the person you are not becoming, the contribution you are not making, the particular thing that only you, with your specific combination of nature and experience and perspective, could bring into the world, that is quietly, daily, going unmade. That is a cost too. It is just harder to see because it is composed of absences rather than losses. Every life has a cost. The question is not whether you will pay. The question is whether what you are paying for is worth it. Chapter 6. Building Towards Something True. This is not going to be the chapter where everything resolves, where the journey of self-discovery reaches its triumphant conclusion. The fog lifts completely, and you emerge with a perfectly articulated vision of your authentic life, ready to execute it with clarity and confidence. That is not how this works, and any book that tells you it is has not been honest with you. What I can offer instead is something less dramatic and more durable. Not a destination, but a direction. Not a complete answer, but a better question. Not the life you actually want delivered to you fully formed, but a way of moving toward it that is honest enough to last. Building towards something true begins with accepting that you may never be fully certain what that something is. This sounds like bad news. It is actually liberating. The search for the one perfect life, the singular calling, the crystal clear purpose, the path that reveals itself in a flash of insight and thereafter requires only the courage to follow it, is itself a trap, a beautiful, seductive trap that keeps enormous numbers of people permanently suspended in a state of searching rather than building, waiting for clarity that never quite arrives, postponing commitment until they feel more sure, treating the uncertainty of not fully knowing as a legitimate reason to not yet begin. What exists instead, what is available to almost everyone willing to look honestly, is sufficient clarity. Enough clarity to take the next step. Enough to know, with reasonable confidence, that this direction is more true than that one. Sufficient clarity is enough to build on. You do not need certainty to begin. You need honesty. Building towards something true is not a single decision. It is a practice, a long, patient, imperfect practice of making choices that are slightly more aligned with what you actually want than the choices you made yesterday. Not a dramatic revolution, not the overnight reinvention, but for most people, in most circumstances, the movement toward the life they actually want is incremental, barely visible from day to day, unmistakable over years. It looks like choosing the slightly braver option when the safer one is right there. Saying yes to one thing that is genuinely yours and no to one thing that isn't, and doing it again the next time the choice appears. Slowly, deliberately, with full awareness of what you are doing and why. Reorienting the small daily decisions of your life in a direction that is more honest than the one you have been following. It is not exciting. It rarely produces the kind of story worth telling, but it is real, and it compounds in ways that cannot be faked or shortcut. Here is something important about the life you are building toward. It will not look exactly like you imagined it. Not because you will fail to get there, but because you will change on the way. The person who arrives at a more authentic life is not the same person who began looking for it. The searching itself, the honest examination of what you inherited versus what you chose, the practice of turning down the noise to hear yourself, the courage required to distinguish genuine desire from performed ambition, the reckoning with real costs. All of it shapes you, changes what you see when you look at yourself, expands what you understand yourself to be capable of. So the destination shifts as you move toward it. The target of your authentic life is not fixed. It is alive. It evolves as you evolve, which means the project is never finished, and this is not a problem. It is the whole point. There is a moment, and I believe most people have experienced it at least once, even briefly, when everything aligns. Not perfectly, not forever, just for a moment. When what you are doing and who you are doing it for and why you are doing it are all pointing in the same direction. When the external action and the internal truth are not in conflict. When the life you are living in that moment is not a performance or an approximation or a concession to practicality, it is simply, unmistakably yours. That feeling, that specific quality of aliveness that comes when what you are doing is genuinely aligned with who you are, is not a fantasy. It is not reserved for other people, more courageous or more fortunate or more free than you. It is available to you, in greater and greater measure, as you do the work of building towards something true. It is what the work is for. I want to leave you not with instructions, but with an orientation. Face yourself honestly, not harshly, not with the grinding self-criticism that so many people mistake for rigor, but honestly, with the courage to see clearly the inherited life, the noise you have absorbed, the desires you have performed versus the desires that are genuinely yours. Move toward what is real, incrementally, imperfectly, one honest choice at a time, not toward the life that will impress everyone, not toward the life that will finally earn you the approval that was always conditional, toward the life that filled in the honest quiet of your own inner experience, like it belongs to you. Pay what it costs, not recklessly, not without care for the people around you and the real obligations you carry, but without the endless deferral that keeps you safe and stuck indefinitely. And stay in honest dialogue with yourself. Keep asking, keep adjusting. Let the target move as you move. Trust that the person you are becoming is a better guide to where you are going than the person you were when you started. The life you actually want is not a fixed destination waiting at the end of a road. It is something you build, daily, imperfectly, through the accumulation of choices that are slightly more yours than the ones they replaced. It is built in the moments when you turn off the noise and listen, when you follow the thing you keep coming back to, even when you can't fully explain it, when you pay the price honestly rather than pretending it isn't there, when you choose what is true over what is approved of, what is alive over what is safe, what is yours over what was handed to you. It is simply a life that, when you look at it honestly, you can say is yours. Not inherited, not performed, not built for an audience that was never going to give you what you actually needed anyway. Yours, built from the inside out, from the truest thing you know about yourself, from the quiet, persistent signal underneath all the noise, that life is worth building. And it begins, as all real things begin, with the willingness to be honest about what you actually want. You were not given this life to spend it becoming someone else. Build something true. It was always going to be the only thing worth building.